Casually Criterion, a casual cinemedia podcast. My name is Mike.
And my name's Justin. Casually Criterion is where we watch and discuss Criterion films in spine order.
And you may be noticing right about now that Chris has not said anything. That is because he is actually experiencing some technical difficulties this week, but he will be back as soon as he can be.
Yep. And we miss him already.
Yeah. And today's episode, we'll be going over what's on our minds, followed by an in-depth review for Samuel Fuller's The Naked Kiss.
Spine number 18, I believe.
Indeed.
All right. If you want to follow along with what we're watching next and want to let us know what you think about The Naked Kiss or any other films we've talked about to this point, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinemedia. You can join our Facebook group and talk film with us at facebook.com/groups/casualcinemedia, or you can email us directly at casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
And since now it's April, we have finished our iTunes review contest. We do have a winner, and that is Tamara Seiler. She submitted her review in through Facebook, and so we will be reaching out to her shortly, and she can pick a movie for us to review sometime in the coming weeks. So we will keep you guys all posted on that, and yeah, more to come.
Yeah, we'll hold the contest again soon, and if you did enter and you didn't win, we're still going to leave your name in the pot. So whenever we do our next contest, your name will still be in there, so you'll still have a chance to win from your, March review.
Fear not.
Yes. And before we move any further, we did want to remind you guys that we are promoting a nonprofit organization called Real Outreach, REEL Outreach. They are a nonprofit organization that is sending less fortunate kids to the movie theater so they could have the experience of escaping for a while and seeing a movie in the theater. Currently, they are doing a promotion to send kids to see Avengers Infinity War. They actually have a GoFundMe on their website, which is realoutreach.com. And currently, out of their $1,500 goal, they have made $900. So they are a good chunk of the way there.
Yeah, so it wouldn't take much for you guys to help out if you felt so inclined. It's for a good cause, for little kids to go see movies in a movie theater. It's an experience that I cherish from my childhood, right? I wouldn't trade anything for that memory of seeing Jurassic Park, or whatever. So anyway, it's a good cause.
Yeah. What is your first movie that you remember seeing in the movie theater? Is it Jurassic Park?
No, I remember seeing, I think Batman Returns came out before that. I know that scared me a lot when I was a kid. I don't remember my first movie, but I do remember my little brother's first movie. He's about 3 years younger than me, and his first movie was Cool Runnings.
Oh.
Yeah, I remember taking him to see that when he was very young. But I don't know. I saw a lot of movies when I was a kid, but I would imagine Jurassic Park is probably one of the first ones.
Yeah, I don't remember my first one specifically, but the first one that I do remember, I believe, is Free Willy, which, it was cool enough, I guess. I liked it at the time.
Perfect little kids movie in the 90s, I guess. Like, what is that, like 91, 92?
I don't even know, but that sounds about right.
Yeah, probably
it's got
so.
Michael Madsen in it.
It does.
A young Michael Madsen, which...
Fresh off that Reservoir Dogs fame.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, they're Real Outreach. Go support them. Send kids to go see a movie. I think it's a good cause. And once again, their website is realoutreach.com.
So moving on in to what's on our minds. All right, Justin.
So last week, I talked about how my girlfriend and I had finished watching The Office. And after doing that, we had to pick up a new TV series to start watching again.
To fill the void.
Yeah. So we chose Frasier, which she has seen before in its entirety, but I have never seen an entire episode before.
Oh, nice. How many entire episodes have you seen now?
I think 8 or 9, roughly.
What are your thoughts on Frasier thus far?
I think it's quite good, actually.
Yeah, Frasier was funny. I remember watching it quite a bit whenever it was on TV.
Yeah, all the characters are really great. I think at first live-in nanny would be the term for her job. Yeah. But Daphne is her name.
Right.
I was kind of questionable on how much I would enjoy her character. She seemed a little too over the top, but as I continue on watching it, I like her more and more. And everybody else, I think, is pretty enjoyable from the get-go. The dad, played by John Mahoney, who actually, I think, died within the last couple months.
That's true, yeah.
So it's kind of nice to watch him. And Kelsey Grammer, his like comedic timing is amazing.
Yeah, Kelsey Grammer is great.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch Cheers?
No, I haven't seen Cheers either.
Obviously, the reason I bring that up, I think most people know this, but just in case, Frasier is a spin-off of Cheers. The character of Dr. Frasier Crane was a regular on Cheers, and the show Frasier, which is a sitcom from the 90s, explores like his whole family situation. Yeah, I used to love watching, when I was a little kid, watching his brother. What's his brother's character's name? Miles?
Character's name's Niles. Yeah.
Niles.
Played by David Hyde Pierce.
Yeah. He was the best part of that show. Like, he's the goofy one that, like, the little kids who watch are gonna like. You know, he's like the Joey of the show.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah, I used to like him when I was a kid.
Yeah, one of my friends a long time ago showed me a clip from Frasier, and it's Niles trying to, like, iron a pair of pants, and he, like, struggles in this very, like, slapstick silent comedy sort of way, which always made me intrigued to watch more of Frasier, and I'm actually really looking forward to that episode and, like, seeing that whole bit again.
Yeah,
I'll get there one day.
Where are you watching that on?
Netflix. It's all on Netflix. Yeah.
How many seasons of that show are there?
There are 11.
Jesus, that's too many. That's too many seasons.
I hear there's a season where they like fired the writers and brought on a new team, and it got really, really bad. And then I think for the last 2 seasons, they fired the new writers and brought back the old writers, and it gets better for like the last season or 2, something like that.
I guess you have that to look forward to.
Yeah, I'll keep everyone posted, or at the very least, just do another Frasier segment once I finish the entire series. So,
nice.
Yeah. And moving on from Frasier, I watched Argo for the first time this week.
Argo. That's funny.
Not for the first time this week. I had not seen it for the first time ever. But
we all know you watch Argo every week.
Yeah. I do not. I don't know that I could handle watching Argo because I guess I'm getting into what I thought about it, but like, you know, it had won Best Picture, so I bought the Blu-ray planning to watch it at some point, and of course I finally did that, and I was actually really, really underwhelmed by the movie. Like, I didn't think that it was that good. It wasn't bad in any way.
Would you have been underwhelmed had it not won Best Picture?
Possibly not. I don't know that I would think it was great.
Right. Yeah, well, it's hard for me to judge because I saw it in theaters before it was even talked about as a Best Picture nominee, right? So I just thought of it as a perfectly adequate thriller. A well-made thriller, you know?
Yeah, and that's how I feel about it, is that it's like perfectly adequate. And generally, I like Ben Affleck's movies, so like maybe that was another reason that I was excited about it.
Did you watch this one because last week you had just caught up on Gone Girl? Are you going through all the Ben Affleck movies you've missed out on over the past few years?
I guess so, but it was more like I'm just watching the movies that I own but haven't seen, just trying to go through those one at a time. And apparently, I have a large collection of Ben Affleck movies I own but haven't seen.
Yeah. What's next?
Yeah.
Reindeer Games.
Yeah, maybe Reindeer Games.
Forces of Nature.
Oh, no. Actually, I would watch Forces of Nature if I had it. Because I don't know. It seems like a rom-com, I think, but maybe it's not. I don't know how
I think it has Sandra Bullock in it, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I may just rewatch Armageddon with
go.
like the director's commentary instead of any of that. But anyways, I don't know. Argo, I don't remember what it was up against for like Best Picture, but I was just kind of...
It was a weak year.
Yeah, that's what I assume because... I don't know. It just seemed kind of okay. And I think by far Ben Affleck's worst movie that he's directed.
Actually, I think he directed a movie called like Live by Night or Die by Night or Travel by Night. Live by Night. Yeah, Live by Night. Yeah. Anyway, I hear that's pretty bad. But between the movies I've seen of Ben Affleck's, it is my least favorite. But Gone Baby Gone is also really good, I think. So
yeah, I liked Gone Baby Gone a lot. Yeah, The Town I thought was also good.
The Town is a very good little thriller, yeah.
He also did a short, which I haven't seen, but I just saw this on IMDb, but it's called I Killed My Lesbian Wife, Hung Her on a Meat Hook, and Now I Have a 3-Picture Deal at Disney.
Huh. I don't like that title very much, but...
Me neither. I just thought it was weird, mostly.
Yeah. What year is that?
1993.
Oh, that makes sense.
It's just like Good Will Hunting and Fame.
Yeah, makes sense. That seems like something a teenager would write.
Yeah, and I think the thing about Argo is that I guess the tone was kind of weird for me because there was so much like fun stuff going on with them trying to like create this movie and pass it off through Hollywood where like they're making like fake appearances for it, so it'll for the press to see, so it'll turn up in like a magazine, so it'll pass like all this stuff. And like you have John Goodman and
Alan Arkin.
Who's Alan Arkin, yeah, is like the guys making the movie, and they're all like, "Argo, fuck yourself." All the, like half the movie
right.
is like that line for some reason.
Right. So, so basically there's two tones. There's the comedic Hollywood plot, and then there's like the very not comedic plot where Ben Affleck is trying to get these people out of this country alive.
Yeah, before they're killed and
right.
And,
so from like a storytelling standpoint, you understand why they would want that kind of levity between like John Goodman and Alan Arkin. But I think that whole comedic tone stopped me from enjoying it more than I think I would have otherwise.
Yeah, it takes away from the rest of it. And, maybe it would work if they did that until they had everything. But, like, we keep cutting back to, like, conversations with Alan Arkin and John Goodman. And, like, even in the climax of the movie, we're cutting back to them trying to get to, like, the phone. Like, because they have an important phone call coming that they need to be there or the whole plan's going to fall apart, basically.
Right.
And they're stuck like across the road from the door of their office because there's a film going, and there's like a bunch of comedy playing out of them trying to like people wanting them to be quiet because they're filming. Mm-hmm. And like just all of that just takes away from like the seriousness of the situation. It seems at odds with the situation, I guess.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't, I can't quite get into either one fully. So it just kind of seems, I think you said, what did you say, is like perfectly adequate.
Yeah, it's
and
fine.
It can't quite exceed that, I don't think.
Yeah. And maybe even if you've seen less movies, probably better than adequate. But if you've seen as many like thrillers, it's a well-made thriller, but nothing you haven't seen before if you've seen more than a handful of movies, I think. So like it's a good movie to watch with like your parents, or a good movie to watch maybe with someone who isn't a huge movie nerd. They'll probably like it quite a bit,
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on Argo. And lastly, what I wanted to talk about, and I guess my favorite thing that I've watched since we last did one of these, was West of Memphis.
Oh, nice.
It is a documentary from 2012.
Peter Jackson produced that, right?
I would assume so. He's in it.
Okay. Yeah, I think he did. He produced it. Yeah. I remember when all that was going on.
Yeah, it's a documentary examining the case of the West Memphis Three, which are 3 teenagers who were put away to either the death penalty or life in prison after the murder of 3 children in, I guess, West Memphis,
Tennessee. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah. Even though they were tried in Arkansas, which it gets a little confusing and they don't explain that. But
maybe it is
that's
Arkansas.
What I assume. I think the murder was in West Memphis, but the trial and they were in jail in Arkansas because they were having to deal with the Arkansas legal system, and they never really explained that. But anyways, the murder was in Memphis, West Memphis specifically, and that's where they were from. I think it was one of those situations where like the trial was so public, or the story was so public, when it came time to do the trial, they had to move it to somewhere else where less people had heard about it, so they would be able to find an unbiased jury.
That makes sense.
But so it's a documentary examining the case, all of the mishandling of the case by the police and the prosecutors, and how these guys basically went down with like very, very little evidence.
Yeah, it was kind of a very famous modern day witch hunt.
Yeah, and it was all built around like, I guess what they called the satanic panic of like the early 90s, where people were all worried about cults and Satan worshipers and stuff, which is kind of goes along with like the stranger danger panic. It's like that same sort of idea that like the media pushed a couple of stories about satanic cults, and like it became the thing that everyone feared, Mm-hmm. Kind of like, I guess, also like poisoned Halloween candy.
Sure, and the main teenager who was dubbed the ringleader of all this, he was also like kind of a gothy kid who was into heavy metal, and like he called himself like a Wiccan, which is like witchcraft, just stupid teenage rebellious stuff, right? But like it blew the minds of like this conservative small town.
Yeah, and apparently in the thing that during an interview he says that he wanted to be a magician. So he was very interested in magic. So
he's just a big, huge nerd, basically.
Yeah, and that the whole conservative town, like when they heard magic, were like, just thought that okay, that's evil, obviously.
Yeah.
But so what's interesting, and where I feel kind of conflicted about the movie, is that it's relatively one-sided, like from the word go. Like these guys are always innocent.
Well, yeah, but they clearly were.
I think in the end they clearly were, for sure. And it kind of makes a point that the media is one of the reasons that they went down, because the media overhyped.
It's true.
The fact that these guys were guilty, right?
Right, but the media is also the reason they were set free.
Yeah, for sure. But there's a point in the movie where they start going beyond just proving these guys innocent, and they actually start piling up the evidence towards another character in the story, I guess.
Is it the stepfather?
Yeah, it's the stepfather.
Yeah, I watched all the there's 3 HBO documentaries about this. I saw the first 2 when I was in high school. The Paradise Lost documentaries.
Yeah, I found out about those while I was watching the movie, and I was kind of bummed because I was like, oh, I would have rather watched those first and got
they're great.
The story, because I hear they're really good.
Yeah, no, it was obvious I haven't seen the third one yet. I think the third one actually was made as they were being released, so it was kind of like altered, so the end of it has like sort of a happy ending. But I remember back when I was in high school, circa 2004, something like that, I was watching the Paradise Lost 2 documentary, and they pretty much paint the picture of the stepdad of one of the children being very clearly.
Well, so in that one, in Paradise Lost 2, they portray one of the stepdads, you're right, as the guy. But since then, they've moved away from that guy and realized that he's probably not the one. But in West of Memphis, there's a second stepdad.
Oh, man.
Character who they start targeting. And the film leaves you with the idea that, like, this guy is guilty. He definitely did it. Like, there's no subtlety in terms of like the filmmaking and the information that they're giving you and what they want you to think about him, right?
Right.
And I felt a little conflicted, because part of the story is that like the media is hyping everyone up, thinking like that person is definitely like guilty. Here's the select evidence that proves that this guy is guilty. But at the same time, the film is doing the same thing about the stepfather character. And like, watching the film, getting wrapped up in the emotion of it, I want to be like, yes, that guy did it. He's definitely guilty. He should go down. It's unfair that, he doesn't necessarily, right? But then at the same time, I'm like, well, hold on, I got to dial it back, because am I doing the same thing as like people who watch the media or the news like reports initially and just assume that the West Memphis 3 had done it and were guilty?
I think in this particular case, there's that book, The Devil's Knot, which I read a lot of in high school. They also made it into a movie a few years later with like Colin Firth, I think, which wasn't very good. Yeah. But I hear what you're saying in the sense that you don't want to jump to conclusions because the movie has an agenda. I'm with you in the sense that like I wouldn't want to convict anyone based on a documentary. However, what I do believe in all the Paradise Lost documentaries and just west of Memphis without having seen it, is that the West Memphis 3, these 3 teenagers, are not guilty. I don't necessarily care if the movie gives you the real killer so much as I don't want to be like, hold on, maybe they really are guilty, because I think the evidence, if you've read any of the books, if you've seen any of the documentaries, I think the evidence is overwhelming that these 3 teenagers did not do what they were accused of doing. And that's the thing I don't want to lose sight of, right? Like, I think I don't want to go into the documentary being like, well, maybe this one guy didn't do it, so maybe we shouldn't quite believe that they didn't.
Oh, right. And that's not my point at all. Like,
okay.
My point, I totally think that they did not do it and are innocent. And it's just like, it's slightly hypocritical to make the point earlier, about the media's coverage of it and about how they were portrayed and how everyone thought they did it based on the portrayal of them.
Maybe. But it also...
And then to do the same thing. And, like, it's not even just, like, a 5-minute chunk of the movie. There's a good, like, 20 to 25 minutes of the movie that are just, like, throwing this guy as, like, this is the guy that is the most likely killer. Here's all the proof.
Sure.
And basically leaving with the idea that, like, he did it.
Sure. But isn't that better? Because even if the whole documentary is building a case against one guy, that is still a better way of going about framing someone's potential guilt than what happened to these 3 teenagers by official law enforcement with no documentary, right? A documentary filmmaker looking at evidence and building a case against someone who likely did it versus 3 teenagers that were screwed over by ignorant middle America morons who happened to be in a place of authority. It's not quite the same.
Yeah, it's not quite in the sense. I think the media and a documentary are kind of close. I don't know the degree that they're as different as you're saying they are, but I do recognize they are somewhat different. I think it makes for great drama, and like I guess we can kind of leave it off and not dive in any further. But it's a great movie, a great documentary. Like if you like things like Making a Murderer, which I really liked, this is for you. West of Memphis. It's like 2.5 hour version of that instead of like 10 hours like Making a Murderer is. But it's fascinating and super interesting. And
I also recommend reading up on Damien Eccles, the main quote-unquote ringleader of the kids. He was basically on death row for a lot of years, educated himself
20
and grew
20
up.
years.
Yeah, basically grew up in jail, and now he's out, and I haven't really looked him up in a long time, so I don't know what he's up to. But it's very interesting, very tragic stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So that wraps it up for me for what's on my mind. And I think it might have been a little long.
That's okay.
But I think it's okay. So what is on your mind, Mike?
Well, first of all, I got a chance to see Wes Anderson's new stop animation movie, Isle of Dogs. People who listen to the show regularly may remember that last week I said we will be doing an episode on Isle of Dogs next. Well, that's not quite true. We will be doing an episode on Isle of Dogs, but not all of us had a chance to see it. Plus, Chris isn't even here. So we will be doing it probably next week.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but anyway, I saw Isle of Dogs. I won't give much in the way of what I thought. I think I'll save that. But what I will say is kind of just, I find what Wes Anderson does with stop animation very interesting. If you guys saw Fantastic Mr. Fox, if anyone listening has seen Fantastic Mr. Fox, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about. Very, very creative, very not typical the way he does a lot of things. It's very cool.
Yeah, I think I get a sense of that from the trailer for sure, that he's maybe expanding on what he did with Fantastic Mr. Fox in terms of the insane detail that's going into
it's
what
great.
he's doing.
It's the best stop animation I've seen. I think it's the longest stop animation movie ever by 2 minutes. It beat Coraline. Just a fun fact.
That's good. Yeah.
All right. Anyways.
Actually, real quick.
Okay.
Would you recommend seeing Isle of Dogs, though? Like, I guess that's going into what you thought about it, but just quickly, yes or no, would you recommend it?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're a fan of Wes Anderson, see it. If you're not a fan of Wes Anderson and you're a fan of just unique movies, see it. Technically, the movie is just amazing, in my opinion. Like, it's just something to behold. So
awesome.
Regardless of your thoughts on Wes Anderson, I think just give it a shot, because just the artistry involved in making something like this is just really crazy. I know there's a lot of talk about cultural appropriation in regards to Isle of Dogs, and I think we'll probably talk about that more on the actual episode. But regardless of any of that talk, just see it from a technical standpoint alone if you're not interested in Wes Anderson, because it really is amazing.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing it and talking about it.
Yeah. And so another movie I watched this week, which is something that I've been hearing a lot about lately. I believe you and Chris already watched it at some other point. But Death of Stalin. So this is from the same director as In the Loop, Armando Iannucci. Yeah. Anyways, have you seen In the Loop?
I have.
Yeah. I think we watched it together, actually. I'm sorry.
We did.
Yeah, that movie's great. I still haven't seen the show that In the Loop is actually like a sequel spinoff of In the Thick of It, or The Thick of It. But I love Peter Capaldi, so I'm down to watch it. But yeah, Death of Stalin is so good. It's a comedy basically about the chaos that ensued in the Soviet Union around the time right before and after Stalin died. And it's about basically the power struggles that took place and the falling out within the government and the infighting. And it's all done in a really comedic way. You got Steve Buscemi. Goodness, who else? You got
Jeffrey Tambor. Yeah, it's great. Like, and everyone's doing their own accents. Chris brought this up on the Red Sparrow episode. But basically, like, they're all Russians, but instead of trying to do a bunch of like Russian accents that they couldn't improv in, they decided to just stick to their own accents, which for this movie I think works. Yeah, I think it works because everybody is Russian, and we know that. Yeah. So even though Jeffrey Tambor speaking an American accent, and so Steve Buscemi, and you have Patty Considine, who I know from Hot Fuzz.
Mm-hmm.
doing a British accent, like you still understand they're all Russian and their accents don't really matter.
Right, yeah, exactly. So
it doesn't get confusing in any way.
Yeah, in this particular case, that method works out great because everyone's allowed to just kind of relax and bust out the comedic chops. And everyone delivers. Steve Buscemi is probably my favorite part of the whole movie.
Yeah, he's the best part for sure.
Is hilarious.
Kind of the shining star.
Yeah, like there's a part, oh man, I don't even want to go into, but there's a part where like they're hovering over Stalin's dead body. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that like Stalin dies, but like
no.
The body basically like urinates on itself after it dies, and they all comment on it, but they all start coming in the room one by one to like see his dead body. And at one point, Steve Buscemi just comes in and like kneels directly in the puddle without meaning to, and it's just great.
Yeah.
It's just great.
Yeah, there's a lot of like physical comedy,
but it also gets pretty
not
dark.
like slapstick. Yeah,
but it gets really dark in some places though, like which I think personally is the kind of thing I enjoy. I enjoyed it way more than In the Loop, I think, because it does actually, I think it's a little more ambitious in what it tries to do. It's all over the place in its tone, but it works.
Yeah, it does work. I think there's not any part of it that's not working for what it's trying to do or not accomplishing what it's trying to do.
Right.
I do think like the last half of the movie, they drop a lot of the comedy and it, like you said, it becomes dark. And I got a little bit, I don't want to say bored, but like I guess like struggled to be as interested in it because they had kind of dropped a lot of the comedy, or at least like it had turned so dark that what they were doing wasn't funny anymore.
Right.
And I was really enjoying the tone up to that point. So once they did that, I didn't enjoy it as much. I don't know that it necessarily means that it was worse. It's just, it kind of like, it took a turn that like went into a less enjoyable stage of the movie, I guess.
I don't know. I kind of disagree. I found they managed the tones really well, and once it turned that corner and started heading into a little section of darkness there in the middle and some drama, like a straight up drama, I would say.
Yeah.
I was into it. I was like, oh, they found a way to sneak this in on me. Good for them.
Yeah, well, I think they handled it well. Yeah, like I said, everything they're doing, I think, works for what they're trying to do.
Right.
I think just on a personal level, like I guess I kept kind of like waiting for it to get funny again after a certain point, and so it kind of didn't. So it kind of disappointed me, like when the humor falls off for a while.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I think maybe watching it again and knowing what's coming, I know I'm not just like anticipating the next time that I'm going to laugh.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I did enjoy it. It's quite enjoyable and super fun, at least for the first part.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about before we get into our review of The Naked Kiss was a TV show that premiered last week called The Terror. Have you seen any of this yet? Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. I've seen the trailer, but I haven't had a chance to watch any of the episodes yet.
Yeah.
But I want to. I thought the trailer looked really intriguing and good. Like it could be like a sort of interesting sort of paranormal. I'll let you tell what it's about though.
Basically, it's about two ships. One is the Terror and one is called something else that I can't remember right now. But it's about them trying to discover the Northwest Passage, or trying to chart it out. And so they're up north, and it takes place a very long time ago, and the ships gets frozen in ice, basically. And that's as far as I'll go. But it's about what the crew has to deal with when they're frozen on ice. And this is a actual real historical event, but I'm pretty sure the show is doing like a fictionalized version of historical events. But it's almost too early to tell. But it's kind of one of those, I think it's going to be like one of those historical mystery type things. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to stick some supernatural elements in there. It's too early to tell. But if you've seen the trailer, you kind of know the vibe of the show. But they're really drawing it out though. So I've seen 3 episodes, and there's still not really any indication of whether or not things are supernatural or not. So
yeah.
But
is it kind of like in that area that like the first season of Lost was in, where you weren't quite sure?
So far, based on episode 3, it's great cinematography, great special effects, great pacing, great acting. It's got Tobias Menzies in it. He was in Outlander, and he's also in Game of Thrones. And it's got a bunch of other people you've probably seen before. Anyway, great pacing so far. I'm 3 episodes in, and I'm definitely on board for the rest of season 1. I hope it continues to be good. AMC is kind of notorious for not really taking care of their shows, so I wouldn't be surprised if season 1 turned out to be a big hit, and then season 2 they fire the showrunner and cut the budget in half. So, we'll see.
Yeah. Hopefully that doesn't happen if it's good. And if it's bad, who cares?
Yeah, true that. Okay. So anything else you wanted to go over before we move in to our review?
No, I'm good. Let's talk about The Naked Kiss.
All right. So without further ado, we move into Samuel Fuller's The Naked Kiss.
$800. You parasite. I'm taking only what's coming to me. 50, 60, 70, 75. I'm not rolling you, you drunken leech. I'm taking only the $75 that's coming to me.
Okay, so The Naked Kiss, directed by Samuel Fuller, is a film from 1964. It is Criterion Collection spine number 18. And the abridged IMDb synopsis, because the IMDb one was very long, is that Kelly, a prostitute, attempts to leave her past and become a nurse despite the wishes of a suspicious cop, Griff, who knows of her past.
Yes, so this is one of Samuel Fuller's probably more famous movies. Before we get into the movie itself, what is your relationship with Samuel Fuller, and what were you expecting before you actually got into this movie? What were you expecting it to be?
Yeah, I haven't seen very much of his stuff. I have seen like the entire Eclipse series that Criterion released, or I guess Eclipse released.
Right.
And that has, I think, 3 or 4 Samuel Fuller movies.
3, yeah.
3. And I thought all of those were really good. There's a Western, it's essentially the same story as the man who shot, or the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. Mm-hmm. And it's basically about the killing of Jesse James. There was one called The Still Helmet that was about one of the wars. I think it's Korean War.
Korean War, yes.
Yeah. And all of those, I can't remember the other one, but
The Baron of Arizona with Vincent Price.
Right. Yeah. So all of those I really enjoyed. I think I've seen maybe one of his other movies outside of that. So I guess I haven't seen very many. I haven't seen any of his bigger films. Like, this is my first time to watch The Naked Kiss. I kind of expected something sort of noir-ish based on like the cover and the previous covers and different artwork that I've seen for the movie over time. And yeah, that's kind of what I expected going in. What did you expect?
Oh, well.
And what was your relationship with Sam Fuller?
Sure. So I've actually seen a pretty healthy amount of Sam Fuller movies. I own and have seen all of the Eclipse series box set like you, which has his first 3 films. I Shot Jesse James, The Baron of Arizona, and The Steel Helmet, all of which were really good. I think The Steel Helmet is the best one. Then somewhere along the way, someone gave me a burned like bootleg copy of Park Row, which is like Samuel Fuller's homage to newspaper movies and journalism in general, because it didn't have a good release, and it was really good. I think that was a guy named Ben, who we went to SFA with. So anyway, and then I also one point bought White Dog.
I've seen White Dog too. Yeah, I forget about that one.
Some used movie sale somewhere along the way. And then The Big Red One, which is my favorite Samuel Fuller movie. But The Big Red One was his war movie, and that's kind of his big movie that he made for Warner Brothers. It wasn't a big hit, but he kind of lost the movie in editing. I've since seen the director's cut, and it's really good. He brings kind of the point of view of, since he was actually in World War II, he kind of brings a different point of view than a lot of directors who make war movies did at that time, you know? And also, you get to see Mark Hamill in kind of a cool non-Luke Skywalker role.
That is cool.
Yeah, so anyway, Samuel Fuller. And there's also another movie I saw. It's a Western called 40 Guns. Yeah, so I've seen a lot of Samuel Fuller, but I had never seen The Naked Kiss before. So this was my first time seeing this, and so I was really excited about it. And you ready to move into what we thought?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I guess...
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first? I went first last time, so if you want to go first,
sure.
I'm not offended.
I really liked it. It's not my favorite Samuel Fuller movie that I've seen, but it's good. And it seems true with what I've, I guess, observed his style to be, which is that he really likes social issues, and he doesn't he likes being very blunt about social issues, usually ahead of his time. And so I think it kind of gives his movies like this very pulpy feel, because he deals with like a lot of subject matter about like the seedy underside of people, you know, or the side of also another movie of Samuel Fuller's I think you've seen, Pick Up on South Street.
Okay, yeah, I have seen that one.
Yeah, I remember because we watched that together. So a lot of really gritty movies, and they don't feel like Hollywood. They don't feel romanticized and fake, I guess. Does that make sense?
It makes sense what you're saying. I don't know that it makes sense for me in regards to this particular movie.
No, I guess this movie's pretty stylized.
Yeah.
But it deals, what I mean, and it's hard to, I guess we're not doing spoilers, so it deals with its subject matter in a very blunt way that for the 60s was pretty, I guess, kind of like in your face.
Yeah, I would agree that, I think I know what you mean. Like it's very just like to the point, and there's no like room for interpretation, or it's not necessarily like subtle in anything that it's trying to say. And in that sense, I knew what you mean. It's like, it's sort of just, he's keeping it real.
Right. I don't know. What did you think about The Naked Kiss?
I think it took me a bit to get into it and to kind of get used to the style of film that it was.
Kind of hokey.
And yeah, because it has a lot of like hokey, like written dialogue.
Very noir pulp feeling.
Yeah. So I kind of got what I wanted out of the noir, but like, yeah, I think like pulpy is like the best way to describe it, because it just felt super melodramatic to me.
Oh, very. Yeah.
And it's been a while since I've watched a film like that. Like, you know, this kind of has like everything short of like the main character looking into the camera and being like, so there I was talking to this cop, and now he's starting to grill me, you know, like giving that like fourth wall, like noir thing.
Right.
Short of that, it had like everything you would expect, I think, in terms of dialogue and lighting and camera angles, which is a good thing. And I'm not knocking the movie for that at all. It took me a minute to
acclimate
to reacclimate to that, because it's just been so long. And I think once I did, I got really into it and just kind of enjoyed it for what it was doing, and I was enjoying that aspect of it. So when the movie takes the turn that it does, which I guess can I go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, why not? Go for it.
Yeah. So when the movie takes the turn that is very dark, we find out one of the characters is a pedophile. That really surprised me. I didn't see that coming or expect that. Like, I was waiting for something to go wrong, but I thought it was going to be born out of her past, like her prostitution, like the guy that she beats up in the beginning was going to come back,
right?
You know, which he does,
or some
later.
Shady character from her past, yeah.
So I thought like her past was going to come back to haunt her, but it kind of comes out of left field. This like character who, I guess I didn't explain it, but like she's gonna marry this guy who's like super rich and has all the money in the world, and she's truly in love with him. The cop thinks something's going on and thinks that guy doesn't deserve her because she used to be a prostitute, and you find out that he's actually a pedophile, right? And to me, I was like, it kind of blindsided me, and that in a good way. Like I was like, oh my gosh! Like I was actually shocked. Like my jaw dropped, you know, at least a little bit.
Yeah, and that's, I think, and to me, that's so much more tragic than something like a figure from her past coming to get her, because if it had been someone from her past, we would have been like, well, what goes around comes around. You can never leave your past behind, and you know, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you try to change.
Yeah,
but,
which I thought that's what I expected
right.
After the first maybe like 15 minutes of the movie, right?
Exactly, right. But whenever she catches him on the verge of molesting a small girl, and the small girl runs out of the house, and you're left behind, and you're like, holy shit, did she just walk in on what I think she walked in on? And her reaction tells you everything right away, right? Her face is just so stern, yeah. and immediately you're like, oh, they're going there. And his reaction to her, right, is the worst part about it. The most tragic part, which is just like, at this point, you know, she told him, she's like, I was a prostitute. My first customer was my last customer. I don't want to be a prostitute anymore. I want to be good. I want to be someone that you're proud of, you know? And he's like, sure. And you're like, oh, what a good guy, being so accepting. But we know it's not going to last. So whenever she catches him, and then he's like, well, that's why I accepted you. I could never be with a normal girl, you know? I could never be with like a good person. I had to be with you instead, because now you know why. We're both fucked up. Like, the idea that he's a pedophile, but he puts her on equal ground as him.
Right. Yeah, like a prostitute is somehow equally perverse as a pedophile is like the mindset, which
right. Which to me, that's the most heart-wrenching part of it all.
And it's kind of universal. Like there are situations in today's world that are similar, where people think that people who, are different are like, I guess, bad. Like I'm trying not to like call out any specific groups or anything, but like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's something like in certain countries in the world, this is still something that is probably a normal like rationality in some courts. Like a woman who was a prostitute versus a man who was a pedophile, the woman would likely still be given the worst punishment in some places in the world, So it's not completely unheard of. It comes from like a misogynistic place. I think the reason it works is because it does ring true, and we can totally imagine this exact situation.
Yeah, there are a couple of things like that hold up, and there's a point to the movie that is kind of timeless and can still apply to today. Before we get too deep, I do want to say that there are a couple of things that we'll get into that I didn't necessarily like about the movie.
Yeah, me too.
Like some flaws, and I also found out that this movie is included in a book that was written by the people who do the Razzies, and they included this movie as like one of like the like enjoyably bad or like laughably bad movies or something like that. I can't remember the exact term, and once I found the article, I couldn't find it again to like get that exact term, but yeah, so they included it and they talked about like how bad the movie is, and I think that's a mistake born out of not acclimating yourself to the movie or not going along with the melodrama and the hokiness of it, which I think you have to do to enjoy this movie, because I imagine if you don't, this movie would be really bad.
Sure, but the Razzies are also like if you look at the Razzies, like they're never going to give awards to the actual worst movies. They're just going to go give awards to movies like that were popular that they didn't like or that they didn't get, So like,
right, yeah. I'm not trying to give any credence to the to the Razzies at all. I'm just thinking like I think that if you are one who doesn't go along with the melodrama, or you're viewing this movie by today's drama standards,
right, it's going to seem a little hokey.
Yeah, it's going to seem really cheesy, I think.
Right. Well, before we get too far into talking about the movie, I think I wanted to talk about that opening scene, which is obviously, I guess, one of the most famous opening scenes. It's what the cover of the movie is about. So basically, it shows her as a prostitute. Basically, this John is not going to pay her, and so she basically like beats the shit out of him and takes her money. And while she's doing that, he pulls her wig off, and you see that she's bald. And so you have like this very striking image of like this bald woman who's very feminine, except for the bald head, right? Just wailing on this man, and it just has like this very pulpy vibe to it, And I don't know, it's very, very, very famous scene.
Yeah, well, what I thought was interesting, and this is maybe one of the things that I don't necessarily like about the movie, but the whole opening scene worked for me, with the exception of the fact that some of it is shot in POV, where she's like looking into the camera and like swinging the purse to like either side of the camera.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know, like that kind of thing doesn't really work for me. Like, even there may be like a handful of movies where I can think of where that's successfully done, but like when a character's talking to another character, but it's like they're talking into the camera and we're supposed to be seeing from that point of view. Like I think we talked about it in like Silence of the Lambs. They do it a couple of times, and it's kind of seamless there and works there. But like, I don't know, this one, it felt, and maybe it's just because that's how the movie opens. I think it's like the first shot is that one of those like POV shots, and I wasn't quite aware of how hokey the movie was going to be.
Yeah, I could see that. I didn't have that so much in the very beginning because it's all handheld feeling, and it feels very it feels like you're there. So I think it's actually filmed better than a lot of, I don't want to call it an action scene, but it's filmed better than a lot of scenes like this of this era.
Yeah.
I feel like Samuel Fuller, wanted to get in there and get gritty and feel the violence, and I think the opening scene accomplishes that. It's not the best camera work, sure, it's but
yeah, I just think conceptually it's like weird to have a character looking angrily into the camera, and maybe that's the point. Like I think it feels audacious, actually. Like it feels ambitious. Yeah,
it does. If for the time, right? I mean, I agree with you. Like if someone did this in a movie in 2018, I would have a different reaction than, someone who made a movie like this in 1964.
I just think it's one thing, even though maybe it was ambitious for the time, like it sort of ages the movie to me. It's like what a part where the movie really shows its age, or shows like being from 1963. Whereas like other than black and white and some other things, like the movie still feels kind of like watchable and timeless to me in certain ways. But like that part, I think it kind of just sticks out like a sore thumb to me. But I don't want to harp on that too much.
Sure.
Just kind of wanted to point it out. But yeah, like that whole opening scene creates like such a striking image that we do like the entire opening credit sequence on her there bald.
Yeah, putting her makeup
Right.
on, her wig on and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and you could see why they would choose to make that the cover of the movie. It's the
Yeah,
scene
it's
you're going to
it's-
remember,
Yeah, and I don't think they actually spell it out for you that she was a prostitute.
Nah.
Like she just kind of beats him and like she grabs his wallet, and it's kind of important. Like she pulls his wallet out and she's like, "There's $800 in here, but I'm just taking the 75 that's coming to me, the 75 that you owe me."
Right. Yeah,
And
she's
then
pretty
she
obvious
leaves.
about it.
Yeah, and that's part of like the hokey. They're really on the nose with some dialogue like that. That's like kind of a expository.
Sure.
But they never actually say that she's a prostitute. So
She
I
does
don't know,
later
I
when
guess
she's talking to the cop Griff, but not
right,
the
right.
beginning.
Yeah, in the opening scene. So like, I think that it actually does a good job of not spelling that out yet and letting us find that out in the next scene when it's like 2 years later and she meets the cop on the bench and she's talking about selling wine. Mm-hmm. But I like that. I like not like leaving that little bit of mystery of like, what's going on? Why is she bald? Why does he owe her money?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe it's obvious if you're really thinking about it, but I didn't think about it.
Well, you don't really think like, why is she bald? I mean, you think why is she bald, but you don't really think like the reason that she is turns out to be the reason that she is. Like she talks about it later, and when it happens, you're like, oh, that's obvious. But I don't think if she hadn't told you, you'd have been like, her pimp shaved her head, But yeah, it's a good way to start it out. The actress is Constance Towers, which she's also in Shock Corridor, which we'll be watching soon.
Yeah, that's our next Criterion film, which I haven't seen either, so it'll be my first time to watch that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought she was really good in this movie. She carries the whole movie.
Yeah, I think like without her, the movie wouldn't work. Like her performance is what really makes this movie.
So I wanted to talk about the character Griff, the cop that she meets.
Yeah.
Man, that character is no good. Like, he is such a sleazeball. I mean, I guess by comparison to the guy she's choosing to marry, he looks pretty good. But, like, just as an honorable man, I find him to be very unlikable the whole movie.
Yeah, he's very hypocritical, right? Like, when he first meets Kelly, he buys her services, which is veiled as wine, but really she's a prostitute. So he sleeps with her and then immediately starts to come down on her for being a prostitute. And it's basically like, look, you can't actually move into this town because you're a prostitute and I don't want any prostitutes living in this town. Go across the river, or is it across the highway?
Yeah, across the river to a different town.
Go over there because there's prostitutes there. This is the place you can go and like be a prostitute, a brothel, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll come visit you.
Yeah, and so it's like it's super hypocritical of him from the word go, from like the time we meet him, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And to top it off, like he's always flying off the handle. He's like a walking case of pent up rage. But I mean, you can tell he wants to help her, but he's just such an asshole the whole time and such a jerk that I don't know. The whole time I was just like, she doesn't need him. Get out of here, Griff.
Yeah, and he's always like jumping to conclusions. Like it kind of seems like an authority thing. Like as a cop, he can like, or a detective, I guess. I don't know which one he is. Like, is he a detective within the cop world, or is he just like a street
detective.
cop? I don't know. Yeah. But it's like he thinks he knows everything that's going on, right? So he's always jumping to conclusions about what she's doing, right? So it's like she decides to give up being a prostitute and become a nurse. And the first thing he does when he finds out is go visit her and think like, you're using this nurse thing to like find clients for your prostitution and I won't have it. And like, he doesn't believe her when she says that she just wants to be a nurse and she's given up prostitution. Like he just assumes he knows everything and is like really arrogant about it.
Yeah, there is one part that I really liked where she's like, I woke up in your room and I looked in the mirror and he's like, you must have taken a real hard look. And she's like, I did. I decided like I didn't want to be a prostitute anymore or whatever. He's like, oh, so you got morals in my room, did you? And I was like, that's cool. That's a good comeback.
Yeah.
That part was like an example of like the snappy noirish dialogue really working for me. It's so like sleazy and pulpy. I don't know. I enjoyed that whole bit.
Well, there's also bits where they're quoting like these like famous like poets and philosophers, and like everybody seems to know like these crazy quotes.
Right, yeah.
These not crazy, but like a crazy obscure, I mean.
Right.
Quotes.
It's a very movie thing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of like I would say make overly written dialogue, or dialogue that feels written, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Nah, it's like Quentin Tarantino's dialogue always feels overly written, but I still enjoy it, you know? So this isn't as good as that, but...
No. And moving on from Griff, there's the famous guy who's in the town. Actually, the town that the cop works in and she's moving to is called Grantville. It's named that because there's a famous family in the town with the last name of Grant. And she meets this guy, Grant, who is, you know, they have all the money in the world. He's just come back from like Europe or something like that. And she meets him. This is after she's become a nurse and given up prostitution, and you know they have a relationship. This is the guy that she's going to marry, and who we said eventually he ends up being a pedophile. But before we know that, I did want to talk about something that I guess is something I associate with like these noir type movies, but or I guess like these black and white movies. I don't know if it's necessarily limited to noir, but like there's a really interesting moment of composition on the scene where she meets Grant. And I don't know if you noticed this, but like in that scene is the cop, Griff, who doesn't like her and has slept with her. And when they meet, we get this shot, and it's the three of them. You see Constance Towers in between, in the middle of the composition, and to her right is Grant, and to her left is the cop, Griff. And you have this like weird, this like, you know, love triangle dynamic going on compositionally. And then as Grant and Constance Towers are talking, they switch places, and Grant moves in front of and covers up Griff. Yeah. And like, so then like basically they're both gonna ignore his looks of like disdain over them meeting. Like you could tell, like based on his looks and like based on his actions, that like he wants them to have nothing to do with each other.
Right. And you know it's coming from a place of jealousy also, because he went to the place that the cat house or whatever that he thought he sent her to, and was disappointed to find out that she never showed up. So you can tell he wanted to see her again, never got the chance, and the next time he sees her, you know, she's marrying some high class guy from his point of view, and you know that makes him even more upset, you know.
Yeah, and more suspicious. Like he thinks that she's going to be into him for his money. You know?
Right, exactly.
And also thinks that he's this great guy. Like the whole town thinks he's a great guy. So he thinks like this guy doesn't deserve someone who used to be a prostitute and probably still is.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But I did just want to call out like that composition, like that the whole like him covering them up and like having that tension. And it's all done within like one shot, like a little bit of mise en scene there that I enjoyed. That I think is a sign of how good of a filmmaker that Samuel Fuller can be.
Yeah, certainly. Much to Griff's disliking, the Constance Towers character and Grant start to court one another and eventually start deciding to get married. But the whole courting montage I wanted to talk about a little bit because it's so stylish, it's so surreal, and kind of an example of what sets Samuel Fuller apart from his peers. He has so much, he had so many cool shots in mind. There's like wind blowing against black backgrounds. So like they're kind of in this like really surreal area where the only thing that exists is them,
Yeah.
And it shows her on a boat, like laying back and letting like the wind and the leaves and everything like flow over her. And it's just like this very stylish, really unique montage that you don't really see a whole lot of in the 60s,
Yeah. And that's the section too where they have the scene where they're watching, I think like home movies basically of his on the projector, and it's like him filming in a camera from like a gondola from a boat.
Right.
And they're sort of like talking about being there and her wanting to be there, and they do some like really interesting like editing stuff that I think is very unique.
Yeah, and I can understand how this movie could have made an impression on a lot of film nerds back in the 60s for being kind of edgy in that sense, you know?
Yeah, there's something we haven't talked about yet is that some of the like cinephiles and stuff from like Europe like really liked Sam Fuller a lot.
Mm-hmm. After he left the United States for a while, he actually made some non-English movies in Europe because they loved him.
Yeah, and he's in one of Jean-Luc Godard's movies, Pierre Lafaut.
Yep, he has a cameo as himself.
Yep, which is really weird because, I don't know, like it doesn't really belong in the movie, but what belongs in a Godard film, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's...
That's true.
Or, yeah, just because something's in a Godard film doesn't necessarily mean that it belongs there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so anyway, very stylish. You could see how he probably influenced a lot of filmmakers going forward.
And there's a couple of uses, and I think one of them is during that time of Moonlight Sonata in the film, which I think is a piece that that everyone has heard at some point, even if they don't know it's called Moonlight Sonata.
Sure.
So if you don't know the piece and you're listening to this, like look it up and you'll immediately be like, oh, okay, yeah, that.
It's like Ride of the Valkyries or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought that was really interesting, and I don't know if that's actually something that's biased because of the way that it's been used in film in our time period, in our generation, but like that song being used in the background of like romance scenes was a really weird vibe to me.
Yeah.
Right? Like it kind of seemed like clashing ideas of like these two characters falling in love and being romantic. Like I think the first time we hear it is actually right after she's slept with the cop when she first comes to town, and then the second time is when her and Grant are talking and falling even more in love, right? Mm-hmm. And both of them are talking about how beautiful of a song it is, which it is, but like I guess now we get all of this use of it where it's like really melodramatic and sad,
right? And
used to highlight like tragedy a lot of the times. And I don't know if that's the way it was seen then, or if it's just something we've grown accustomed to.
Yeah, as a result of it being used in movies since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But really, like, it all kind of everything that's happening when Moonlight Sonata is playing are things that lead her down a dark path, or like to a very, very dark place, right?
Right. Yeah, that's true.
So it's almost like kind of foreshadowing in a sense. And I'm not sure if that's intentional or just a byproduct, but I just thought it was really interesting use of Moonlight Sonata.
Good catch. I didn't even notice.
Before we get into like the big climax thing where like the movie turns in the last part of the movie, I did want to ask you. We have that scene where Constance Towers is like rehearsing a musical number with the kids, I guess for like a little pageant they're going to put on, and we have the scene where the kids are singing, and it's actually kind of long. Considering it's just kids singing and they're not like dancing, or we're not getting too many shots of it. And eventually she joins and starts singing.
Yeah.
And what did you think about that scene?
It's not a scene I would say I enjoyed as it was happening, but I would say it's necessary knowing where the movie goes later. You see her as a nurse, you see her helping these kids out, singing along with them. And you show that she's got a motherly side to her, right? That she cares for people. She's got compassion. She's been a prostitute and she's viewed from the outside as poorly, but we know that she's sweet and that she's capable of love and that she cares about children, and she's good with them. So later on in the movie, I think it's more disturbing from her point of view. But yeah, so during the scene, whenever they're actually singing and she's singing with them, man, it's a little corny.
Yeah.
And not very pleasant to watch, but it's not that bad either. There's a couple shots of like the nurses and like the employees who work at the hospital too. They're like watching it go down, and they look very serious and stern. And I don't know why. I was wondering that whenever I was watching the movie, I was like, man, they seem so like not into this.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything to that or not, but
I'm not sure either. That might be something I'd have to pay attention to again.
Yeah. Well, if you watch again, the employees that are like working there that aren't her do not seem very happy during the scene when all the little kids are singing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. Like personally, it was kind of trying on my attention.
Sure. Oh yeah. Yeah.
For that scene, like there were times where I thought of like, why is this so long?
Yeah.
Like, why do I have to watch like this entire song, which I think it feels like it has like 7 verses.
Right. Well,
and, like,
but then again,
8
later, whenever she comes home at the final climactic scene with Grant, and that song is playing though, Like
Yeah.
the recording, I think that's why it's so long. Is so that the recording could happen the whole time that scene was going on.
Oh yeah, that's actually a very good point. I thought you were going to say that like it's so long so that it gets pounded into our heads so we immediately recognize what it is.
No, I think
we hear it.
I think it's so that while that whole her catching him in the act scene is happening, the recording is long enough to play through that whole scene.
Yeah. Do you wonder how he got the recording, or did it show?
Maybe she took it home, you know? Maybe she's like has it in her home because it's for her own personal use and in non-perverted ways.
Yeah.
And then he was just like, oh, I could do something gross with this.
Yes, you can. Very gross.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just never explained, or at least I never caught, like maybe I just happened to like zone out for a second, but I don't remember seeing how he got the recording of that performance.
Nah, I assume it's just hers and he knew where it was.
Yeah, I don't think it's that important.
No, either way, it's pretty upsetting. That was like the icing on the cake. Like when she comes in, that song is playing. Because like as soon as she walks in, I was like, oh God, why is he listening to that?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of the thing that goes from like where we might assume that this is some sort of weakness he's had and he's acted on it and like in a moment of passion, but actually listening to children singing while you're doing it is like super premeditated. So I think that's the key that gives us like the idea that this is a long running thing and something that he does and has done and
it's like lighting a
accepts
candle
in his own life
or something, like setting a mood.
Yeah, exactly. And it's pretty gross.
Yeah.
and disturbing, and yeah, like that whole scene just really like I felt like the carpet got yanked out from under me.
Yeah, it's a great little twist at the end of the movie because you're not expecting it. At least I wasn't.
No, not at all. And is there anything else you want to talk about then, or can we kind of move on to afterwards when she's in jail? Because I guess we haven't said, but after she finds out, he kind of pressures her to stay with him so they can be together, and she's so caught up with emotion that, you know, in a callback to the first scene where she's beating this guy, she starts beating him, right?
Yeah, with a phone.
And yeah, she gets the phone and she hits him and she kills him. And so from there, everyone knows that she kills him. I guess she says like, yeah, I killed him. I remember I killed him. So she's in jail and Griff has her locked up. She's telling him the story of I came home. He was with a girl. He was going to molest this little girl. And Griff, being Griff, assuming he knows everything and hating her because of her past life, doesn't believe any of it.
Yeah, basically he's just, you know, being the bad cop the whole time. Every time she explains what happened, he'll be like, yeah, but why did this happen, you know? Why'd you do this? And basically, like, it's very obvious that he has his mind made up about her. And so we are to worry for her at this point, you know, because we're like, how is she possibly going to prove her innocence now, you know? So
she can't remember what the kid looks like.
Right, it's all a blur for her because she was emotional. Yeah, so she doesn't even remember who the little kid was.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I guess I get it because once you remember who the kid is, they can actually question her. But it also seems weird that he doesn't believe most of what she's saying, but if she can remember who the kid is, he'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, so I'll grab that kid if you tell me that that's the one, right? Like, it seems like he would not trust that as well.
Well, maybe he doesn't, but at the same time, it's like if she can provide him a solid lead, he'll follow through with it, you know what I mean? Like, he's not going to believe her the whole time, and he'll be like, I don't believe you. But if she's like, look, now I have an actual trail of breadcrumbs for you to find, will you at least do it, even if you don't believe me? Like, I think he's willing to do his job, even if he's going to do it eyes rolled the whole time, you know?
Yeah. See, she does provide some other like potential stories that will help her out, and he does follow up on those leads. So I think you're right.
Yeah, like he tries a couple different leads that end up going nowhere, and then eventually she finds the little girl outside the jail cell, conveniently, playing outside in the alleyway.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. This is one of those like movie things, right? Where it's just we have to accept it and move on.
Yeah, and I did want to talk about the fact that and I did want to talk about another thing about his character, Griff's character, that really irked me, is that he doesn't take her on her word at all. And anytime someone comes in who's going to tell a story, because basically throughout the movie she's tried to help people and do different things, but like everyone that she's tried to help or everyone that she's wronged throughout the movie comes in and basically doesn't corroborate her story or makes up a lie about her that makes her seem like a worse person than she is.
Right.
And he immediately believes all of them. Right. Like which is weird. Like, he never, and I guess they're not the ones under question here, but like,
right. Well, and
I don't
also
know,
he's
kind of
been
annoyed me.
burned by her. I think that's what I read it as. I read it more as a little bit more nuanced than that. Like, not as him being an idiot, but him being like a simpleton who was burned by her, right? Like, he thought she could be like his regular across the river, and instead she has the audacity to try and better her life and marry someone who's not him, you know, like, and like go above her station, you know. Screw her. Who does she think she is, you know? And so I think it's easy for him to believe that she's not being sincere and that she's still treacherous and terrible, versus like a girl who's genuinely trying to leave her dangerous situation behind, but has accidentally stumbled into an even more dangerous situation in like the suburbs where she thought it was safe, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I don't think it's like bad writing or stupid. I agree with what you're saying. It's all born out of his character, but it's one of those things like that makes him like pretty unlikable.
No, absolutely. You hate him the whole time because his own like insecurity is what's driving a lot of this.
Yeah. And I guess one of the themes that is something that is really important to me, and I guess it's why something like we talked about earlier, the west of Memphis, is so interesting to me, and probably to a lot of people, but it really touches me in a place of like, you know, the people are supposed to be like innocent until proven guilty, right?
Right. It's supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think it's obvious that she killed him, but like even when she's telling him what happened and why, and like she just never has a chance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, she never has a chance with him, and that's not necessarily like what the law is there to do, or like a cop is there to do. Like, they should be investigating it, right?
Right.
They should be investigating it like,
but it's human nature,
thoroughly and with an open mind.
Yes, in theory, right?
Right. And I know it's just something that like hit home, I guess, for me in this movie, and one of the things that I really grabbed onto that made me really like what it was doing.
Because that's one of those things that feels true no matter what, right? Like, what's like a modern day example? Like Get Out. When we were watching Get Out, there's a scene at the beginning of that movie where a cop asks him to see his ID, and there's nothing overtly wrong that he's doing, but you know it's coming from a place of just like the whole attitude is wrong. And when the whole attitude is wrong, you're never going to be able to prove your innocence to them because they've already decided. So it's like it's a scary thing that happens in a lot of movies because it's born out of a real situation. Like when you're in some place where like the authority figure has it out for you based on like a racist or prejudiced viewpoint, and so we're worried for our main character even more because they have to overcome that whole aspect, right? Which is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, because probably 100 times out of 100, most people are going to side with the cop's word.
Exactly, or their own gut instinct.
Criminal.
Yeah, exactly.
Or proposed criminal.
Right, exactly. And also, it's hard for us to change our minds once we've got it in there. Like once we've decided what is what, it takes a very advanced person to look at themselves objectively and be like, maybe I should change my mind here, you know? Maybe I've jumped the gun. Because usually pride starts messing with you, you know? So I'm glad they spared us all that aspect. I'm glad Griff in this movie ultimately did see the light, but I can see how this movie would have felt like a true ending had he never seen the light and just assumed that she was never going to change and that she was just bad, you know? It wouldn't have felt out of place to me.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't have. I agree. And I think maybe there's room to bring that point home a little bit more, and this kind of takes me into one of the things that I really don't like about the movie, and it's one of those things that it almost makes me like the movie significantly less. And so I kind of want to know what you think about it, but like there's no, if I remember correctly, apology from Griff to Kelly. Like once he finds out, he's like, yeah, okay, I get it. And then like she gets off, and like he doesn't like ever say like, you know, I'm sorry for not believing you before, or we never see like some scene where it's like something bad happens to the cop for being a crappy guy.
No.
The entire movie. And I feel like that to me is like an opportunity missed. Like I don't need it to be the main point of the movie, but it seems like he got away with being like a relatively bad cop and bad guy without anything bad happening to him. And I don't know if it's, I don't know. What did you think about that?
I took it more as, well, you're right, I guess, but it didn't bother me so much because I get the feeling that he wants her to stay. And the first thing she does when she gets out is she's like, bye, you know, and you have like the parade banner for like the children's hospital that she was working on the street as she's leaving town, you know? So you get the idea that she's just packing up stakes and leaving everything behind. We have this banner here to remind us, you know, what she might go back to, but she's not gonna. And I think Griff is probably hoping that she'll go back to the life that he wants so he can visit her, or even maybe give him time of day. But I think he's left to be like, oh, you're free. And then she just leaves town. And so he's going to just think about this for the rest of his life. So I don't know if it's like an overt like lesson learned on his part, but I do think that he will be thinking about how the way he handled this situation going forward in his lifetime, right? Because like she's leaving town and he does not want her to. I think that much is obvious, right? Did you get that from the end?
That he doesn't want her to?
Yeah. Do you get the vibe that the whole movie, I get the vibe that he wants her. Like this is all stemming from a place of like insecurity and jealousy that she chose to clean up her act.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what his last line was. It's been like a few days since I watched it. But I remember his last line just feeling like, yep, well, there she goes. You know, and just not having like much feeling about her. Like, you know, like it seemed like he respected her more as a person.
Now that he knows she killed a pedophile.
Yeah, but I didn't get the vibe that he would that he wanted her to stay or wish she wasn't leaving or might miss her or anything like that. I felt like nothing changed with him as far as like character. Like just the only thing that changed was his view of her, which isn't necessarily a character change. That's just based on facts that are laid out in front of him.
Sure, but I think because his view of her changed, just because he didn't get like a lesson learned at the end of this doesn't mean that once she leaves town, he's not going to sit there and think long and hard about how the events of this movie unfolded, you know?
Yeah, and that's true, but I think that's something that's filled in entirely by the viewer at the end and could just as easily not be filled in, you know? And I guess I don't know that I have the faith that is what they wanted or Samuel Fuller wanted.
Sure. No.
Us to be left with as much as it is like us putting it on there. And it feels to me almost like that wasn't necessarily a thought that like the cop needs some sort of change because he's a bad person.
Sure. No, I don't think so either. But that was also just like something that you were kind of mentioning, like you had a problem with personally. That's not something I had a problem with that I don't think needs explained or needs to be tacked on. That was just kind of my response to what you were mentioning earlier about how you felt like his character needed more at the end, like more of like a lesson. Is that right?
And I said that earlier, and I think maybe not a lesson, but like a sign of change, a sign that like his character has gone through an experience, and I don't feel that he was any different
so
at the end than where he started.
Sure, and here's where I'll push back. Here's what I think the movie is trying to do. It seems like a very Sam Fuller idea to me. Is the idea that one can try to change. They could try to move to a quote-unquote nice place, a better place, but when you get there, you find it is perhaps more dangerous than the crappy place you just tried to get out of, you know? So I don't know that it's necessarily the point of the movie is supposed to be like a condemnation of innocent until proven guilty so much as it's a society condemnation, which is just that if someone tries to clean up their act, society might not let them. And so because I think that is the point, I don't necessarily think that the cop needs to change at the end because he represents us. He represents society not letting her change. So we are, at the end, to want him to learn a lesson because we need to learn that lesson. Sam Fuller is telling us to learn that lesson. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I understand what you mean. I don't know that it feels that way to me, but maybe. I'll say maybe.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, maybe not, but that's kind of what I took from it. It seems like a commentary on what happens whenever you try to better your life, and maybe when you're going into the place that you thought was better, it maybe isn't as good as it looks from the outside, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I think there is also a sense of like, even when you try to change your life and start doing good things, like there's a bit of like, even the good things you do can come back to like bite you in the ass, right?
Right.
Like she tries to help the girl who's pregnant, gives her like $1,000 so she can have the baby and, you know, to help her out with that, which seems like a great thing, but it's one of those pieces of evidence that she borrowed $1,000 from the guy just before she killed him.
Right.
So like, yeah, I guess there is a bit of that message to it. So I understand what you mean, like of like sometimes like you can't quite leave the past, but also like the world has a way of like balancing things out or like still coming after you.
Yeah, once they've made up their mind about you, sometimes you don't get to change because they don't want you to change. They've already cast you as the villainous role.
Yeah. And I guess even though she got off, it was based on like pure facts, indisputable evidence.
Right. She had to like twist his arm.
So even in the end, I guess maybe there's nothing in this story that suggests that he will be different that the next time someone comes, right? Or like nothing. He had to be beat over the head with facts, not actually have his ideas changed. Like there was no other way for him to like look at the situation once the child said what happened.
Right.
So maybe you're right that change isn't drawn out of the story and might feel tacked on or added for change's sake to have a character who changed. So maybe I'm wrong.
So I don't know. Anyone listening, if you have thoughts on the naked kiss and what we're supposed to take from it, if I'm right, if I'm wrong, Justin's right, let us know what you thought.
Yeah. So I guess does that do it for the naked kiss? Anything else?
I think that does it for me.
Okay. Well.
So what'd you think before we wrap it up?
Of the movie?
Yeah.
I still feel about the same way. Like I think it's really interesting and entertaining from like a mystery perspective, and you have to buy into the melodrama. Some of the things that bothered me, I guess I'm a little bit more on the fence of like whether or not it bothers me about the cop. I'll have to think about that more.
Yeah.
And like the cop's character and whether or not it changed.
Sure.
And whether or not he was just, I guess I would compare it to like 3 Billboards, right? Like the thing that people are saying about Sam Rockwell, like his character didn't necessarily have any like anything happen to him for all the bad things that he did. And I don't necessarily want to bring up the discussion, but like I'm still kind of on the fence of whether or not that's the case. So without that, I think I do like the movie a little bit more, I guess, than when we started, but I really liked it a lot. Like it's really just an entertaining movie with some interesting concepts that really make you think about things that are going on today that, and so it still feels like relevant and timeless in some ways other than like the melodrama and the dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say this is probably in the middle of all the Sam Fuller movies I've seen, as far as my enjoyment goes. I still think my favorite is either The Big Red One or The Steel Helmet. Those are fantastic movies, but this is a really good melodrama and a really good little noir. Very stylish, very cool. It's got some ideas, like you said, that still hold up today. So what more could you ask for?
Cool. Well, our next Criterion film that we're going to be doing is another Samuel Fuller movie. It's Shock Corridor. Came out the year before Naked Kiss. We were watching them in spine order, but that actually takes us out of chronological order.
Oh, yeah, by the way, Chris is not here today, but he did want to make sure that we did notice that Shock Corridor was playing at the movie theater marquee when she was walking down the sidewalk in The Naked Kiss. So I'm sure everyone saw it, but just in case, fun fact, Shock Corridor was on that marquee.
Yeah.
In The Naked Kiss.
And weirdly enough, that's when she shows up to town. And I read this on IMDb that someone had taken the time to figure this out, I guess, but it's actually it's like 1962 when she first shows up to town, and Shock Corridor is playing in the theater, but Shock Corridor doesn't actually come out till 1963.
Oh shit!
So it's like an anachronism or whatever. It shouldn't be in there.
Yeah. What a crappy movie.
Yeah, I hate it. I changed my mind.
Yeah, just kidding.
Yeah, but yeah, Shock Corridor is our next Casually Criterion episode, so look for that.
All right. And before we wrap up, we had one final question that we thought would be fun. What is your favorite movie with a prostitute as the main character?
Yeah, that'd be fun. There's a good bit to choose from.
There's a lot of movies to choose from. That is a very common character type.
Yeah, I actually had a hard time choosing.
Okay.
But, do you want to go first?
I do, in case you pick mine.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
So, the movie I wanted to choose was Nights of Cabiria by Federico Fellini from 1957. Yep. Have you seen this movie? Just kidding, I know you have.
Yeah, I think we watched it together.
Oh, it's so good. It is my
favorite
Fellini movie. I've seen it twice. I haven't seen it in years, and even as I'm talking about it now, I'm excited to watch it again because it is so good. It is, let's see, let me get the IMDb description real quick. A waifish prostitute wanders the streets of Rome looking for true love, but finds only heartbreak. It's very episodic, a lot like La Dolce Vita, or some of Fellini's other movies, but it feels more focused because it's about one character, and the themes seem pretty constant throughout. I won't go into too much detail, but it was on Criterion. It was out of print for a long time. I think it still is.
Yeah, it still is.
Yeah, but if you can find it anywhere, please watch it. It is so good. It is starring Giulietta Messina. Yeah.
Giulietta Messina.
It stars Giulietta Messina as Cabiria, and it is just fantastic. So, and again, that is Knights of Cabiria, 1957.
Yeah, I had that as my backup in case you took my first one. It's like it was my second choice, and it's like number 2 or 3 in terms of Fellini movies for me. I'm a big Fellini fan, and then this one is very high up there. I think Giulietta Messina is like one of the most fascinating like actresses to watch.
Oh, I know.
Like
she's
her facial expressions.
Yeah, she reminds me
eyes.
of Lucille Ball.
Yeah.
Just very watchable, great facial expressions, really funny.
Yeah, and just the pure like charisma to watch on screen.
Exactly.
Like I could just watch her. I could, if this movie was twice as long, I could watch it just as easily. I think.
Yeah, exactly. She's just so watchable. Like I could watch her in anything. Like she's a lot like Frances McDormand. You mentioned 3 Billboards earlier. Just charisma.
Yeah, and not to mention that it also has one of my favorite endings of any movie ever.
Indeed. So yeah, Knights of Cabiria again. Watch that movie.
Yep.
What's your favorite movie with a prostitute, Justin?
Yes, it's a tough choice. I got like 3 or 4 other ones that could all easily be it, and it's always hard to pick a favorite something. So I'm just gonna pick one almost at random here, but I'm gonna go with Vivre sa vie.
Ooh.
By Jean-Luc Godard.
Anna Karenina.
Yep. Starring Anna Karenina, who we worked with a lot. I'm a big fan of that era of Godard where which I guess is like kind of like height of the like, I guess more stylized French New Wave.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a black and white film. Anna Karenina plays a girl who can't make rent on her apartment, so she gets locked out, so she turns to prostitution in order to make rent and get back into her apartment. And the film follows kind of what ensues from that decision. But there's a lot of like the interesting filmmaking going on from Godard here. We have the scenes where like she's watching The Passion of Joan of Arc in the theater, and she's watching like the silent version. So there's like this big long like kind of silent scene of them in the movie theater where she's watching it, and
it's just a shot of her crying.
Really effective to me. Yeah, she's crying, and I don't know. Anna Karenina to me is again another one who's like just like oozes charisma.
Oh,
right,
for sure.
And has like those eyes that you could just watch like a close up of her forever, basically. I think.
Oh, I know.
And
the way Godard films her, sometimes you can just tell that they were in a relationship together, because like the way he films her is just so lovingly. Sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's this other scene where she works in like a record store at one point, and there's a scene where like we're looking at her talking to someone, and the camera just does like a 360 spin while they're talking. Like it just starts to pan away and pans like the entire way around, like out the windows of the store and back in, like while this conversation is going on. And it's one of those things that like Godard does, and you're just like, why? I think we said earlier, like just because something's in a Godard film doesn't mean it belongs.
Yeah.
And it's just those quirks that I find like super fascinating about this film and other Godard films. But this is definitely one of my favorite of his, and probably my favorite prostitute movie, or movie with a prostitute.
Yeah, it's a great one. Viva sa vie.
Yeah, My Life to Live is the English translation.
Indeed. I remember when that movie came out on Blu-ray, I think pre-ordered it because I was so excited. I was going through a Godard phase.
Yeah, I think that was one of the big ones that neither of us had seen, because I'm pretty sure we watched this together as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Pierre Lafaut and Viva sa vie were my favorites.
Okay. Well, that is it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Thanks also to Jake Wagner Russell for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Next week, we'll be reviewing the new Wes Anderson film, Isle of Dogs, and we will have a bonus episode on John Krasinski's The Quiet Place. which I'm very excited about.
Me too. It was in my most anticipated of 2018.
No one cares about
when we
your
did
most
that.
anticipated movies, Justin.
I care.
Okay.
I just want to call out that I been anticipating it longer than everyone else, and be cool.
Yeah,
because of
he's
that.
the more hip A Quiet Place fan.
That's right.
Or the more hip potential A Quiet Place fan.
Yeah. But yeah. Okay, so if you want to ask us questions about those films, give us topics, things you want us to discuss on the films. If you want to let us know what you think about The Naked Kiss or any of the other films we've watched, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinemedia. You can join our Facebook group and talk film with us at facebook.com/groups/casualcinemedia. You can email us directly at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And I guess we don't say this too often, but please give us a review on iTunes. We just had our iTunes review contest. We'll be doing another one soon, but in the meantime, go ahead and still give us a 5-star review, even though we're not doing a contest.
Yeah, we would really appreciate it. It helps grow the show, and we could always use some constructive criticism.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, I guess that's it. So until next time, bye-bye.
See you later.